Spoken
I
language.
haven't thought about flying for a long time. I haven't dreamed of that moment when I was alone above the clouds for a long time. I haven't dreamed of waking up in a room surrounded in blue and green grass for more years than I could dream of remembering. I haven't walked back into the past or scratched on the doors of my origins, where it all came from, since I hung up that cape for the last time.
Return to Cape Town 10th Year Anniversary Edition is a revised version of Andy N's first poetry book. The book can be purchased from Amazon and it contains numerous additional material.
Spoken language.
You wake up one morning after not reading a book since your school days and you decide to be a writer, with no good or bad writing to compare against your own. You just know how to write and anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. Hell, maybe they're jealous of your natural ability to craft a masterpiece. After all, most people need to learn through a combination of books, courses, critical feedback and workshops. Not you though. It's not their fault they don't realise your natural talent, but they soon will.
How to Write Wrong is the new book by Amanda Steele. The book, which is an interactive story, gives the reader multiple options throughout its story. The book can be purchased from Amazon.
Spoken
Thank you
language.
today for tuning in to Spoken Label. Spoken Label was originally set up at the beginning of 2016 and as of recording has over 200 sessions in our archive. Although the podcast can be heard on Anchor, iTunes, Apple, Spotify, YouTube and literally 10 or 11 other networks, the full archive can be found at Spoken Label, all one word, spokenlabel.bandcamp.com. On Bandcamp, it is set as pay what you want, so you are entitled, if you wish, you can download it or stream it for nothing. But if you throw me a couple of pennies my way, it is always eternally grateful to help me maintain the operating costs and future running costs of this podcast. Enjoy.
Spoken language.
Hi guys, Andy N, Spoken Label, back in the house and on Zoom again today. Got a nice local flavour today as well. And the gentleman in question doesn't realise this. I don't think he does anyway. But me and Amanda first heard of him when he was interviewed by a friend of ours on All FM fairly recently, Ruth O'Reilly. Because Andrew Shanahan was speaking to him, doesn't realise that Ruth O'Reilly is Amanda's best friend. So it's great when you do that, because in this case I've chatted to Andrew today about his book before and after. I know I'm pretty well his story now, because after Ruth did such a good job chatting to him, so I don't have to do much research. So Andrew, seriously mate, introduce yourself to everybody, tell them who you are, where you originally came from, and what led you on the creative path that eventually led to your novel.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, that's quite a lot of information. So I'll try and be brief to start off with, at least. So my name is Andrew Shanahan. I am originally from Stoke-on-Trent, Stafford Way, but moved up to Manchester and have lived all around Manchester, Withington, Northern, and we've slowly moved further and further out of the city till we're in the rough end of Wilmslow, essentially. So I've been a journalist probably for over 2 decades now, working for mostly The Guardian, Telegraph, Times, Daily Mail, Don't Shout at Me, and whoever paid me, basically. And so along the way, I've started a couple of businesses which I've built up and sold, and the last one that I built up was a business called Man v Fat. And it's an organisation that's supported men around the world. We've helped over 4 million men now to lose weight and to deal with their weight problems. And kind of when I moved on from that business, I went back to what I love doing, which is writing. So I'm now a full-time fiction writer, as absurd as that sounds.
Fantastic. Now, obviously, like your debut novel came out beginning this year, Before and After, which obviously goes in quite well into your Man versus Fat thing you used to work in as well. So was it always deliberate when you started the novel off to be going into that territory, or did it change over time?
To be honest, I mean, you'll often hear as a writer people talking about that sort of piece of advice: write about what you know. And I think that's really true. You know, it is very, very valuable information to write about what you know, clearly, because it saves time doing the research if you know what you're talking about in the first place, and it leads to that authenticity that readers really want. I think the other thing that's not mentioned as much is write about what you care about. And you know, you often know about what you care about because you spend more time dealing with it and thinking about it and talking about it. And for me, you know, men and weight, although it's such a weird thing to kind of care about and be involved in, like it was really on my heart. It was really a passion, and it still is. You know, through doing Man v Fat, I spoke to and interviewed so many men who were desperate to lose weight, or so many men who had lost weight. And you know, I really care about that as a subject, and I think that there's so much to say, because it's not really a subject that other people touch, possibly because it's, you know, a deeply unpleasant thing. You know, fat blokes, who wants to write about that, who wants to talk about that? Well,
it's not fashionable, that's for sure. So
it's you know, it's only me in the niche.
No, I agree with you completely with that. So it's such an unusual book, what you've done with this book. Like I said, I have read it, and when I was reading it, I thought, I've not read a book going this way before. So then, was it always planned to have the book started off at the end of the world and everything went mad, or did it?
No, not necessarily. I mean, so as I say, writing about what you care about really grew into this. So to give you your readers and your listeners an overview of what the book's about, it's about a guy called Ben Stone who weighs 601 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilograms. Probably about two. That's a lot. Yeah. So he's a big bloke. And he hasn't been outside his flat. He lives on the 4th floor of a block of council flats in North Manchester, and he hasn't been outside of his flat for 9 years. And you know, I spoke to a lot of guys who they call them shut-ins, and that's the term for them. But you know, these were guys who, either because of their size or because of their mental health, hadn't left the flat for a long, long time. And you quite often see, or they occasionally crop up on quite prurient TV programs where people are looking into their lives because it seems so ludicrous. You know, how could you maintain such a bulk and yet never leave your house? And I think people always sort of have this idea about who these people are and what's going on with them. And I just found their predicament and their situation so tragic and so fascinating in a morbid way, that I just thought it was a really interesting dynamic for a story. So Ben, in the story, he weighs 601 pounds, hasn't been outside for 9 years, and the poor bloke, he's got diabetes. And at the beginning of the story, they're taking the front wall of his flat off so they can lower him to the floor with a crane. And it's at that point that he's all wrapped up and ready to go, but the world ends. And for me, you know, I love apocalyptic sci-fi fiction and, you know, those sorts of thrillers. But it was more about this idea about the drama of this situation being in the flat and what happens to Ben and how he survives, rather than what goes on outside. You know, that's definitely quite possibly a story for another day. But equally, I just found his story the most interesting thing. And I think, you know, often when you're reading sci-fi stories, everything's sacrificed to the concept. You know, you find these amazing high concept thrillers in sci-fi, but actually, you know, I think you ask anyone, what people want to hear stories about is people, because, you know, we're people, we're humans. We want to hear what happens to the people. So it doesn't matter if it's, you know, in a galaxy far, far away, a long, long time ago. You still want to know about the human stories connected to that situation. And so that's really what fascinated me with Before and After, and led me to ask all those questions about him as a character.
Yeah, you took him on a heck of a journey, that's for sure. I know he really, by the end of it, he literally not just transformed his body, he almost transferred as a person as well. It was like, it was just an incredible story. And it was like, I don't want to give too much spoilers away, obviously. I'm not like that sort of thing, but what made you come up with the very, should we say, frankly shocking way of feeding? Should we say, when he absolutely removed the body parts?
I think it was, it's one of those things where once you'd established the real. So one of the guys who I interviewed for the book was a guy who needed to lose his leg. So he lost his leg to diabetes because of his weight. And so once you'd sort of established that was going to happen in the story, you start sort of asking, as someone interested in the drama of a situation, you start asking about, well, what would happen, if once you've said the big what if is if the world was ending, how do you lose a leg if the world has ended and there is no 999 that you can call, and it is literally a case of life and death. He, as you say, heavy spoiler warning, but as the book progresses, obviously his diabetes doesn't go away and he still needs to lose his leg, and he's left in this predicament of, well, if it's die or lose the leg, he chooses to lose the leg in the most direct way possible. I think part of that is because I quite like a bit of gore and I quite like a bit of blood and guts and all the rest of it, but equally it just seemed like a very logical progression. I didn't want to shock anyone. I didn't want it to be there for shock value. It was a necessary thing that needed to happen. We knew at the beginning of the book he needs to lose his leg. That doesn't change just because the world's ended.
No, completely. It was like, it's got me when you got to that stage. Obviously, we're very spoiler heavy here. When he did that bit, I was just sat there thinking, and I know Amanda's the same. She said it. We both said this when we read this at the same time, and it was like, I said, I don't believe that Andrew's just gone and done that. It was just a case of I sat there thinking, I thought, oh my goodness. That's why, but so obviously I said it was that was obviously in your thoughts straight at the beginning of the book, then, basically, wasn't it? It sounded like it was that shocking scene. Obviously, it was an important part of the book, and it was obviously it struck me when you told me then, you'd been planned all along that, and it wasn't the case that they had this idea halfway through, was it really?
No, it was sort of central to the book from the beginning. The thing that always sticks with me from that scene is the fact that he uses a Jodrell Bank tea towel to help with the clear up. And
I remember that.
It just strikes me that it's something that probably, a good 60-70% of Manchester kitchens would probably have somewhere. And I just love that detail of it, having that something so obvious, for me to have around. It always just makes me laugh a little bit.
Oh, completely. That one is just, it was so blackened. If people read the reviews in your book, that seems to come up automatically almost straight away, doesn't it? Like, I mean,
yeah.
Did you anticipate the reaction you'd get to that scene when the book first came out?
Do you know what? I think the thing, obviously people are entitled to their opinions always about whatever you write. As soon as you write something, it doesn't belong to you. You can comment on it the same as anyone else, but it's everyone else's right to comment on it too. The two things that sometimes bug me about comments that people make about the book, one is that, so across the course of, the dramatic situation that Ben is in is that from the start of the book, the world has ended. He is stuck in his flat physically and psychologically as well, largely. But he doesn't have any food in his flat because he's been running down the cupboards before he goes to hospital. And he has literally nothing to eat. And people occasionally say, well, how can he survive for so long with, eating nothing? And the fact is that I did like so much research about how possible that was, and the current world records for those sorts of things about medical fasts and things like that. So I'm always like wanting to. That's the one thing I want to go back to people on and go, yes, it is entirely possible for someone of that weight to last as long as he does without eating. And the other one is the around the scene with when he loses his leg, let's say. And again, that was pretty scrupulously. And having said I like a bit of blood in a story, I like it from a reader's point of view. I'm pretty delicate stomach, so I don't like finding out about these things. But I've got a couple of friends who are doctors and a couple of friends who are vets, and they took me through blood by blood and gristle by gristle what happens during an amputation. So I'm pretty sure that's nicely accurate as well.
Oh wow! Oh yeah, completely agree with that one. It was like yeah. Well, we'll just move on because like I said, I'm going to end up with upset stomach otherwise. And I thought we've got a lot of work to do tomorrow at work. I want to ask you next, obviously, about the other major character in the book as well. That is his pet dog.
Yeah.
Now, tell us about what made you want to have a pet dog.
Well, again, I think the dog that he has is Brown. He's a Manchester Terrier. Not a lot of people know about Manchester Terriers, which surprised me a little bit, but they are fundamentally the greatest dog on earth, not only because they're from Manchester, but they're such a smart, loyal, clever dog. They're just awesome. I wish more people knew about Manchester Terriers. It's sort of,
They're not a common breed nowadays, that's for sure. In Manchester, anyway, certainly.
Yeah. No, exactly. And they used to be very common, obviously, in Manchester and Liverpool, actually, as well, because they were ratting dogs. And so what would happen is that a ratter would take a Manchester Terrier into the hold of ships. So, as they came back, they would, and because the Manchester Terriers worked so closely with the ratter, they often have this very, very close relationship with a human. They're very loyal, very smart. And they're phenomenal hunters for rats and for rabbits, that sort of thing. And anyway, so for me, it was kind of within the context of the book, Ben is given a dog by his mum who is dying, and he often ponders about why she gave him this dog as she was dying. And she sort of, Brown the dog becomes a bit more like a sort of lasting symbol of his mum's love and his, how she feels about him in canine form. And she's just, I think, when I was writing the book, what I really wanted to write about was hopelessness and despair, and about being in those situations and feeling those things, and, being at the end of everything. And for me, what I really wanted to put in there was about sources of hope. And because, I think, not to get too globally conscious about everything, but I think, there's so many people who feel like that at the moment, and who suffer from anxiety and depression, and just this sort of sense of the world's going to hell in a handbasket sort of thing. And not necessarily knowing where their hope comes from. And for me, the book was largely about suggesting those routes to hope that, some might be relevant to me, some might not be relevant to other people, but, animals, faith, music, friendship, relationships, just sort of positing those things and sort of hoping that readers can see that, wherever they are and however bleak things may be, that there are those sources of hope there. Whether or not you're connecting with them at this point is not necessarily, I don't know, but I hope that people see that those things are out there.
Yeah, I think Brown is still a lot of the show for me, actually, as the character in it. Nothing against Ben as a character. Ben was really engaging. But Brown, I think it's because I've had one dog all my life when I grew up, and that dog meant everything to me, my family. And that's why I know dogs are like when they're very attached to your owners. And it really bought something when he's put, obviously, Brownie went out on every certain, I'm not going to spoil it, so be careful with spoilers. But when he went out on missions for Ben, basically, you're out thinking, come on, don't kill him, don't let a zombie eat him. That's fine. No, it was beautifully told, that bit also.
Oh, thanks. Well, I really appreciate that.
What I'm interested on the design of the book as well is, obviously, we've got the bourbon biscuit at the front of the book. Was that always the plan to have that on the front cover? Was it that come afterwards?
Well, I'm very lucky that I've worked with a designer called Yolanda Yo, which is fundamentally one of the greatest names of anyone ever. And she has worked with me on pretty much every project I've ever done. And so it was obvious that she was going to design the book cover for me. And we were talking about kind of, we tried all sorts of different, because one of the big things about, when you're designing a book cover is about how so many people tell you it has to fit in genre. So you should be able to, in theory, you should be able to look at the front cover of a book and go, I know this is an action thriller. I know this is, James Patterson ripoff. I know that this is a Harlan Coben style book. And we tried all of them, and they just felt so pastiche and naff when we were doing it for this book, that because ultimately we didn't feel like it fit perfectly in a post-apocalyptic fiction category, which broadly it does. But also it's a lot about other things. It's about weight. It's about hope. It's about, dogs.
Social commentary in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
Isn't in
exactly.
normal zombie book. Yes, it's very, very different.
Yeah, exactly. So if we had a leering, lurching zombie on the front cover, we felt that even though that would have said, look, this is more post-apocalyptic fiction, we felt that it massively sold the book short. So we went full on symbolic, and the biscuit, the bourbon biscuit, is just, it's a design classic. Everyone knows it. Everyone, and also, funnily enough, I feel subsequently that actually it cashes in on a little bit of food marketing psychology, which is that we're primed to respond to seeing high fat foods, and we've been primed by food companies over generations, like over the last 50, 60 years, to start salivating and thinking, oh yeah, I'll check that out. When we see an ice cream, a biscuit, a burger, those sorts of things. And so in a funny way, I think having the bourbon on the front cover has been pretty effective, really, because I think regardless of whether people go, oh yeah, that's a sci-fi book, which obviously they don't, they go, oh yeah, biscuits, I quite like biscuits.
I noticed that when I was looking at the I thought, oh, I love bourbon biscuits. I'm not allowed them, so I'm diabetic as well. But that's why. But no, I'm getting completely. That's great. It's a great idea for that one, certainly. So now, I've only got a couple of things I need to ask you today, anyway. So, obviously, I know you told me before, Mike, that the book was actually finished last October, wasn't it? So like it was like, and you told you, was it March? June to October? You wrote it over that 4-month period, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was probably. I think I started in July, ended, and then finished the third draft in October. So in between July and October, it had gone through 3 drafts.
Yeah, well, that's pretty good going, that isn't it, over that period of time. So did you find, because obviously I know Amanda, when she does novels, it takes her about 5 to 6 months around to go for 4 drafts on a novel. So did you find with this one then, was it quite, obviously when you got your teeth into it, it obviously flowed really quickly, didn't it? So
yeah, to be honest, it really did flow very quickly. I mean, the book's probably about 90,000 words long, so it's not like the longest book in the world. But once I'd written the first draft actually wasn't wildly different to how it finished up. But it was very much the last. So I think it was about the last third of the book ended very, very differently in the first draft.
Did it right?
And it kind of went off in this much more typical action zombie direction. And reading it back, so my sort of beta readers and my children and my wife, and we all just sort of read it and went, yeah, that's bollocks. So after, yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, I mean, they're great because obviously they don't pull their punches because they just think I'm a loser. So it was really obvious that didn't work, but that it was also really obvious that the first 2/3 really was interesting and had something that you wanted to learn more about. And so then rewriting the last third was very much just, oh, okay, it needs to go in this direction. And it kind of, yeah, it was a joy to write. Really, it wasn't difficult at all, actually.
Yeah, so hold then. So obviously since then, have you got? Is it too early to mention what's coming next or anything? Have you, or have you got another book on the go at the moment? Have you?
Yeah. So I mean, I've been very, very lucky that it's been so well received, and it's had like over 1,000 different reviewers now, and
they really good going, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from it's an indie published book, so it's self-published, and it's sold incredibly well. So I'm can't complain in any way, shape, or form. But I think the thing that I'm really proud of and really pleased with is that people are really engaging with it as a story, and they really seem to had quite a few emails off people who feel that it's made a significant difference for them, or that it's sort of, I think, hit them in the way that I hoped it would. So that's been really, really gratifying. And also subsequently, because of that, I've had a lot of people ask me if I'd write a sequel. And I'd kind of never really anticipated it becoming like a big, long series. But I feel like at some point, I need to return to the story and just kind of give an update of where they are and what's happening in their world, because people really love them as characters, and that's really gratifying. So the next book, so I am writing another book now, which is not going to be in their world. It's completely different. It's a book about the race for Mars in the 2030s.
Cool. No, cool. Like I said, I'm in, already, I know people don't know if Andrew's been researching me. And I've got you don't know Andrew at the moment, so I've got an album coming out on an experimental label show on Mars.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, so I love doing all this space stuff, and it's great at the moment. So that's why. But take it, have you always, and obviously, I'm not going to ask you big details about the novel, but is it, Mars has always been an interest to you, has it? That planet, so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not the Andy Weir type who could write a very detailed, fact-filled, truth-filled, or true to fact book about Mars missions. That's not me. But I find like it's a really fascinating, because it's going to be, get used to it. Mars is going to be everywhere for the next decade, because it is going to be a thing in the 2030s. I would stake my non-existent reputation on it. But yeah, I think that, and so for me, what it allows you to do, especially writing a little bit further into the future, is to talk about where the world is now and extrapolate a little bit about some of the the asinine policies and the places that we've got to in terms of Brexit and populism in politics, and just take it in a slightly different direction. So I won't give anything away other than to say there's a huge amount of psychedelic drugs in my book.
Good man. How long have you been writing the book for then so far? You've been into it for a few months, this book, have you? The second one?
Yeah, so this one, I think I've been writing for about a month now, about 25,000 words into it. I'm hoping to have a rough first draft done before Christmas.
Oh yeah, then get it out, maybe get it out next year at some point, and fingers crossed, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, I'd like to, my personal ambition is to try and get it out on January the 31st. It's probably a little bit ambitious, but certainly sort of February time next year, I would like to think that it will be in a place where it's finished and I'm starting to figure out how to get it out there.
Oh yeah, fair play. Fingers crossed for that one. We'll be in touch about that in the design, definitely, so with that one.
Awesome.
Now,
thanks,
Andy. The last thing I want to ask you about today was, and Amanda asked me to ask you about this as well, was if anybody goes onto your website at the moment, you've got an option here where you can ask, you can get people, you can ring people up or speak to people on the phone, can't you? And read out extracts of your before and after.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for this come from?
It
Because it's
became,
unorthodox, that's for sure.
it's certainly unorthodox. I mean, unorthodox, I like unorthodox, but I mean, as you can tell from our chat tonight, I clearly love the sound of my own voice. And
You're such a quiet,
feel
shy
very
person.
happy. Yeah, exactly. Feel very happy inflicting it on other people. And it was because when the book came out, so, you know, the other great irony, of course, about Before and After is that it's a book largely about being trapped at home while a pandemic rages outside. And who knew 2020 was going to be all about that? So,
it's just the timing on it is just impeccable.
Oh,
yeah, you
I know.
You couldn't have planned it better.
Well, a friend of mine said, I think your viral marketing campaign's gone a bit far.
Yeah, I think it's perfect being right, realised.
Yeah, I know. But you know, I've had to be really careful about how to talk about the book and how to market the book, because clearly, you know, I have to be sympathetic to the fact that although I could jump up and down and go, you know, do you know what, this is a book about being trapped at home during a pandemic, I have to also be sensitive to the fact that people have died and are dying of COVID, and that you can't just be sort of surfing off the back of that going, look at me, I was lucky enough to publish something about this at the beginning of the year, because clearly that's just reprehensible and disgusting. So I've tried to just be more sensitive about it than that. But so one of the things that I was really looking forward to and had had a few offers to do was to do some readings for the book with groups when it came out. And clearly, you know, from the book coming out in January to kind of end of February, it was abundantly clear that that was just not going to happen in 2020. And I thought, well, do you know what? Like, the whole point about me reading it to people is just so that I can kind of talk to people about it and get in their ear holes about it a bit. And I'm perfectly happy phoning people up and reading to them. So I think I've done about 100 readings with people now.
Wow.
All around the world, like, you know, genuinely, America, Australia, some different European countries, and then loads in England. But it's been really, really interesting because some people signed up. So Pop Bitch featured it, and the B3TA newsletter, Beta newsletter, featured it as a story. And so I had lots of people who genuinely hadn't heard anything about me or about the book just sign up going, oh yeah, you know, it's a laugh for a lunchtime. And so I'd phone them up, do a 15-minute reading, and then just chat to them. And I met some really, really fascinating people through doing that. And it was, I will always do that. I think I love doing it.
Oh yeah, completely. It's a really interesting idea. Well, sounds something like I noticed, like it's anyway, you can do it for a website called that. So, how did you find out about that website then? Was that an accident? Now was it to book it through?
What, the You Can Book Me one?
Yeah, You Can Book Me one. Yeah.
Yeah. So if any of your listeners want to book in for it, I'm more than happy to do it for them as well. So if you just go to my website, which is helloshan.co.uk, you should be able to find a link on there that links directly to it. But I think I'd used it for something else for booking things on. And it's great because you can just stick your calendar on there and people just book in a time slot. And so a lot of the time it was people, you know, they're on their lunch hour and just fancied something different. So one guy went out and walked every day during his lunch. And so I was speaking to him as he walked. One woman, I'm almost certain, was on the toilet while I was reading to her. So, you know, I hope I used the passage of that particular episode.
Brilliant. Oh, I know. It's one way of getting to meet people that way, that's for sure. Oh, blimey. Right. Obviously, people want to find you, obviously. Your website, you mentioned your website and how you can book me as well. I know you're on Twitter as on the handle Nervous Crying as well. So is there any more pages we should be referring people to as well of yours?
Yeah, I think I'm going to rip it all up and start again. But anyway, so yeah, where I'm most frequently found is on Twitter at Nervous Crying. You can also find me on Instagram at Shan is Writing and Facebook at Shan is Writing. Primarily, I think probably the easiest thing to do is if people go to my helloshan.co.uk website, they can find me and whichever social profiles I'm active on at the moment. I don't know about you guys, but I'm I'm getting increasingly sick of social media and just thinking about ditching the whole lot of it.
I treat it a laugh based a lot of the time, don't you? I don't tend to really upset myself too much over it. So that's why I just do more podcasting and chat to people. That stops me worrying about it. Then mention what I'm going to mention. Then I'll just go play music all day long, or talk to them, or drive them under crackers normally. So it's having a lot of it is I think the way the world's gone, you know yourself, it's strange times at the moment, and who knows how long it's going to last for, basically. So,
like I like the community aspect of it. It's just I also find that I end up engaging in conversations that I don't want to engage in. I also find that it's just too adept at inciting me to anguish and anger, and I just don't think that's healthy for me. I'd rather just be, anytime that I'm on the computer, I'd rather be, writing something for people, and if they dig it and want to share it, great. But if not, I don't think I need to be involved in discussions about bloody Trump and Boris Johnson.
I'll keep off it as much as I can, because, like, obviously, I told you what the job I do, I can't really go into the political side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I had occasionally, you'll see me putting comments about people's political posts saying, banging head on table. I was thinking, I get fed up with it frequently, don't you? So. And that's why it's like, I'm glad in our cases, I did truth, I'm glad we got off TV. Because if we had a television, I'd be ripping my hair out at the moment.
Yeah, so what you just completely ditched the TV entirely?
I got rid of about 4 years ago on TV, and the man does not have one for even longer than that. So we watch stuff on Amazon Prime and Netflix and other bits and pieces. But we won't go around. I'm glad I don't have the TV option nowadays. Generally don't.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. I think it's I think increasingly these things we need to talk about more and have this sort of idea about what is a healthy media consumption, because I think we've been too passive about, oh great, it's there, let's take it, and it's like, idiots when you go to a party and there's, you're just sort of binging on everything that's there. And it's ultimately, you do have to learn some discernment. And maybe other people have learned this far sooner and far better than me, but I feel like I've just been kind of properly still binging about it, or rather than going, do you know what, maybe I don't have to be on this platform. Maybe that's not healthy. And I think that from a writer's point of view, it's far too easy to tell yourself that that's how you connect with a readership, when actually it's bullshit, because the way that you connect with the readership is by writing good things. And if you can do that and put things out, then, people read it and tell other people about it. And that's how you build an audience.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely with it. So I found over lockdown, the last thing I want to touch about today as well is, have you used it as a chance to try out different forms of writing that you haven't done before, or different approaches even?
When in what sense?
Yeah, over lockdown, because like I'm a poet, like I've used this chance to try and learn how to master doing like haikus and tankers and other things like that, and I've never done them before. So it's like, have you been like trying out different approaches in your writing and looking at things in different ways?
Do you know what? I think for me, during the pandemic, writing has been a really positive mental health experience, because it broadly hasn't changed at all. I mean, my working situation has always been that I write in a shed at the bottom of our garden. And that hasn't changed. I still do that. And for me, so therefore I've tried to just keep to as if that's just normal, and I think that having those little rituals and those little moments that haven't been affected by the pandemic are massively important to all of us, because it's just normality, isn't it? And I think we're all having to cope with so much new normal, that those bits that are old normal just feel welcome and reassuring.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's a great way to finish it off today. So, Andrew, well, I'll put all the details up for everybody. So it's well worth checking out his book. It's been a pleasure reading and chatting to you today. Now, hang around, Andrew. I need to quit early off mic. Thank you for today. And everyone, look at part 2 of the podcast, because Andrew's going to send over to me the MP3 of this book. And we're going to put the first 10 minutes or so, let you listen to it. So it's awesome. Fascinating and innovative stuff, that's for sure. So
thanks so much,
guys.
Andy.
It's been a great fun today. Thank you again, Andrew. Take care, guys and girls. This is Andy and signing out. I'll see you all soon.
Spoken, mate.
Hello, my name's Andrew Shanahan, and I wrote a book called Before and After, which was released in January 2020. It tells the story of Ben Stone, who is 601 pounds and is, for the last 9 years, has been a shut-in his flat in Manchester. And just as he's being removed from the flat because he needs to be taken to hospital to have his leg amputated, the world ends. And it's a story all about him and what he learns post the end of the world. So I'm going to read the first chapter. I hope you enjoy it. Tuesday, 4th of August 2020, 601 pounds, 273 kilograms. The fireman who falls to his death is Carl, and the one who kicks him out of the window is Carl. It seems like such a pointless thing to remember, but when the two firemen first arrive at my flat, Carl makes a big thing about him being Carl with a C and his colleague being Carl with a K. It would be more accurate to say Carl with a C is the one who compulsively chips in gags and catchphrases, and Carl with a K is the one who mostly works in a tight-jawed silence. It's the sort of bobbins you say when there's very little that needs to be said and silence is awkward. Everyone who has been through the flat that morning has their own versions of this mouth noise. Mostly it consists of a series of introductions and overly cheerful explanations. Hi Ben, I'm Josie, I'm the lead bariatric nurse, and I'll be helping to move you and making sure you're comfortable until we get to the hospital. Hi Ben, I'm Dr. Ash, and I'm responsible for making sure you're all fit and healthy for the big move. Hi Ben, I'm Lloyd, and I'm one of the diabetes nurses that will be getting you safely out of your flat and into the ambulance. There are more. I tune them out after a bit. The first name stuff is supposed to be reassuring and make me feel empowered. They all call me Ben once they've established that I am happy to be referred to that way. Ultimately, it makes it all seem like we're a bunch of mates who get together occasionally to lift a 601-pound man out of the front wall of his home with a crane. All standard stuff, very normal. Another of the inanities is that they all individually ask me to repeat and confirm what it is that's being done. So I tell them all repeatedly that I'm having my leg amputated, and once that is established, then we confirm which leg it is. They all ask me to go through this process, even though Dr. Ash has already drawn on my right leg and signed his initials. It's surreal to watch him do it and barely feel a thing, thanks to the nerve damage from the diabetes. Even without the messy FA scrawled on my leg, I hope it would be apparent to anyone even vaguely medically trained which one is the poorly leg. If the nasty sunburn hue, drifts of peeling white skin and mottled purple and black patches don't give it away, then the 4-inch scab on the top of my foot should clinch it. So, you're having your right lower leg amputated, is that correct? That is correct. And you've had the process of what's happening to you today explained? Yes, at least 1,000 times. And do you have any questions? Yes. How did I get to this position? What went wrong? Who will care for Brown? Why can't I stop thinking about eating? Am I worth saving? No, it's all clear. Thank you. The council workmen arrive punctually slightly before 7 a.m. There are 4 men dressed in black and grey multi-pocketed trousers, paint-spattered work boots and polo shirts with the Housing Association logo printed on them. They work purposefully with a minimum of equipment to remove the front wall of my flat and the sidings to the balcony, revealing an extended view over the surrounding buildings, the hills, and the distant city that I can see from my bed if I sit up straight. One of the first things they do when they arrive is to fix a large plastic sheet diagonally across the living room, cocooning me in a bright, blank space that sucks and billows in the gentle breeze like a diaphragm. In theory, this is to protect me from the brick and plaster dust as they take down the wall, but aside from a dry taste to the air and an early fit of sneezing, there isn't much disturbance. I ask if they want a brew from behind my curtain, but a voice beyond the veil says they've brought flasks with them. I do wonder whether the sheet just makes the whole thing less awkward for them. There is a gap in the sheeting next to the wall where I can see the men as they carry large yellow builder's buckets of bricks, and the patio doors out of the lounge, down the hall and out of the front door of the flat. I watch them as they trudge back through the flat, sweat seeping through their shirts as they work in the early heat. The workers don't meet my eye and seem to feel it is easier to focus on their buckets or the seams of their gloves as they walk past. The entire project only takes them about an hour, including removing the screen, and throughout that time they barely speak a word. The oldest of the 4 men sidles over to my bed and asks for a signature on a battered clipboard as the rest of his team get their tools together. I thank them for the new view and sign whatever it is he passes to me. Maybe he just wants an autograph. There is a glorious half hour of quiet before the medics and the firemen arrive. I check my packing again and eat breakfast. Hot sweet tea with oat milk and 4 sugars and 6 rounds of toast, margarine and jam. After breakfast, I reflexively open my last packet of bourbons and slowly feed them into my mouth until they are all gone. I assure myself that this isn't compulsive eating. The deadline of when I have to stop eating and drinking before the surgery is looming, and I want to make sure I'm not going to go hungry. Plus, I've done well on my diet recently, so I've earned a bit of a treat to calm my nerves. I watch the steam curl from the top of my mug and wonder what Mum would have made of it all. I know. She would have thought it was exciting. She loved having people over to the flat. When the team arrived, there are 4 from the hospital, 3 nurses and 1 doctor, plus 2 members of the fire brigade. On Middleton Road outside and on the roof of my building, there are another 5 members of the fire brigade. They are liaising with the crane operator and a further 2 workmen who are using a cherry picker, a heavy-duty elevated working platform that has a cage at the top for someone to drive and move the boom arm. I nearly have a heart attack when I first see a fireman apparently floating past the window outside my flat. I calm myself down. Too much effort and money has been spent for me to cark it now. The multi-agency movement strategy was painstakingly explained to me when it became apparent that I needed the amputation. For years, the Housing Association has been aware of my living situation and tried to coax me out of the flat and into another property. They carefully explained the health and safety risks of having a super-obese man in a top-floor flat. They said that after a risk assessment, they no longer felt it was safe for me to use the building's ancient lift, which would need upgrading if it was ever to carry me safely. They dropped hints about legal action, but they never quite got around to evicting me. Then type 2 diabetes succeeded where the persuasive powers of housing officers had failed. Essentially, there are 3 steps to the movement plan. Get me out of bed, get me out of the flat, and get me to hospital. The first challenge is that the medical staff and firemen have to get me onto something called a bariatric med sled. This mostly involves rolling me from side to side on my bed and gradually sliding a plastic board with handholds underneath me. As the heat is stifling, I've been advised to wear just underwear, and so the first mortification of the day, but by no means the last, is lying mostly naked in bed, being pushed back and forth by the team like they're working dough. It doesn't help that as they jostle me, I can't stop a small fart from creeping out, which has just enough of a rasp that it was very obviously from me. I'm so sorry, it's the moving and the nerves, I explain, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. Don't worry, Ben, it's perfectly natural. Nurses get it all the time, says Lloyd. That's why they pay them so much, says Carl, causing Carl to snigger. When you're my size, you get used to everything having the prefix bariatric. It's not a toilet, it's a bariatric commode. It's not a bed, it's a bariatric sleeping platform. I've even got bariatric shoes, although I don't think I've ever worn them. Say all the bad things you like about being a shut-in, but it does save you money on shoes. Bariatric is one of those words that only medics and insurance companies use, and as far as I can tell, it mostly means fat in a costly and complicated way. Once I'm finally on the bariatric sled, I am secured in place to prevent me from slipping. I experience a sting of vertigo as the foot of the bed is lowered, and the whole team carefully move me onto the floor where another stiff plastic movement board is waiting. I suddenly have a vivid memory of seeing an adult at a 7th birthday party holding a plate with an untouched jelly vertically over the bin. I remember watching the jelly grip at first, then slowly slip and fall into the bin. I remember the adult had caught me watching and smiled at me, and I recoiled with embarrassment. I try to roll my body to find a comfortable position on the hard floor, but I can only move an inch and I am essentially immobilised. The movement board is again strapped up to prevent the med sled itself from moving about on top of it. The final act is to hook the entire sausage roll to the crane outside, which will very carefully perform the act of taking my weight and lifting me into the air. The movement board has a steadying line attached to the cherry picker, but this won't actually be taking any of the weight. It'll just steady my horizontal movement and ensure that I don't swing out of the flat like a wrecking ball and demolish a nearby building. No one says that is a concern, but I get the distinct impression that it's been risk assessed. The plan is then to manoeuvre me out of the flat and lower me extremely slowly over the 44 feet to the ground and onto a bariatric paramedic trolley. I will be winched into the specialist bariatric ambulance and taken to hospital. I've been told they are expecting a crowd and have erected barriers to keep people at a safe distance and to protect my dignity. In this part of North Manchester, a crowd would gather just to marvel at a crane, so the idea of some fat, shut-in weirdo suspended from a crane will probably close schools and factories for miles around. I'm bracing for a commemorative issue of the local paper. And then, for the first time since I was 16, I'll be outside the flat. A lot must have changed in 9 years. I can look around and see what lies beyond the corner of the road. I'll be able to see the other third of the advertising billboard just before the roundabout that is currently obscured by flats. I can turn and look back at Ellis Tower and see where I have been for nearly a decade. The thought of seeing my flat from the outside makes me feel like I'm falling into a deep crevice in the earth, plunging into the core. I feel dizzy and my breathing gets shallow. One of the nurses monitoring my heart rate and blood pressure asks if I am okay. I lie and nod. Once I'm out, the council workers will come back in and fix a tarpaulin across the missing wall to ensure that my flat isn't open to the elements. Not that rain is a concern currently. It hasn't rained in 74 days now, and across the country there are widespread drought warnings in place. The tabloids have stopped declaring it Britain's record-breaking summer and started questioning whether the endless heat wave might be indicative of a wider problem. The heat has even been blamed for the sporadic rioting we had in June and July. I'll probably be begging them to leave the wall off rather than boxing me in again. This is, of course, dependent on whether they'll even let me return to my flat. My surgeon has said that a creeping amputation is a distinct possibility, so I might need to have further operations before they can even discuss whether I could go home. Recently, I've also found out there are additional complications, which I've been trying hard not to think about. Weirdly, the thought of dying worries me far less than the gnawing tension of being away from the flat. The biggest challenge of the first stage has been the missing wall and working at height, which means that the team have had to wear safety harnesses tethered to the cherry picker and secure spots in the flat. There are a lot of excuse me's, jingling of harnesses and ducking under straps. Carl says it feels like they're doing a maypole dance. By now, everyone has realised that you don't have to react to what Carl is saying, so no one laughs and Carl seems fine. As they click the final straps across my chest shut, I feel a panic mounting like a dark wave and consider asking for the sedative which I had been offered earlier. But as tempting as oblivion seems, my anxiety insists that I have to be in a state of pin-drop alertness, or an unspecified calamity will occur. It isn't just being pinned down that makes me nervous. It's the sheer enormity of the moment. The air from outside the window smells vivid and different. I feel supernaturally attuned to each second and the new sensation that it brings. Even familiar feelings like the burning friction from the 4 deep boils that sit on the underside of my belly seem more real in that moment. I hear one of the team call on a radio for the crane to start lowering the chains into position. I gulp and look at the crucifix on the wall. Was I worth all of this effort? 2 phones ring simultaneously and there is a burst of static from a radio and a garbled message that I can't hear. After a few seconds, more phones ring and phone notifications ping. There is a buzz of strangely intense activity, the sounds of people packing equipment and leaving, and then a mumbled explanation. Ben, we need to get to... We won't be long. Then nothing happens for 2 hours.
Spoken, mate.